filibuster here.
So, Alan, I'm wondering if you could just kind of step back and reflect a bit more broadly on two things and their interaction. One is what you saw emerging out of the 19th Party Congress. I mean, one of the big stories that people are chewing on is that Xi's power has been consolidated. There's no obvious successor. It looks like he's going to be there for a long time. And I mean, people are speculating that he is now the strongest leader of the People's Republic of China since Mao Zedong, and may be there, as long as Mao was. Who knows? And the second thing is, by purchasing power parity dollars, China has surpassed the United States now as the world's largest economy. In nominal dollars, may happen in 5 or 6 years. Their military budget is expanding dramatically. From what I understand, they have doubled the percentage of their GDP, which keeps increasing, that they're putting into research and development. So the power balance is shifting. So you've got Xi concentrating his personal power, and China's power, rising. So, do you think that's a fair assessment? Those two statements, and if they are, and they just keep going on like that, what does that mean for Taiwan? Over the horizon, maybe 10 years from now.
As you know, there are debates about how strong, even now, even with the incorporation of the thought of Xi Jinping, what is it, socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era. I think he's very strong. I don't think there's any question about that. Is he unchallengeable? Probably by the particular group he is put in on the standing committee. And I don't see the Politburo being a particularly independent power base either. But he has huge challenges still. And so I don't necessarily buy the notion that China is, and I didn't put it this way, but let me exaggerate what you said, is inexorably rising economically. I think that they, we know their growth rate has slowed down, and maybe that's okay. That may not be a huge problem, because at their stage of development, that may be more important. And maybe, in fact, there are some who are speculating that now that he has more or less consolidated his power and also gotten deeply into the anti-corruption campaign, which I don't think is going to go away, by the way, that he can now turn to the kinds of promises and commitments made at the third plenum on the economic field, and that we will see some greater dynamism. No question that there is enormous initiative and creativity coming out of China today. I'm sure you remember not so many years ago when university professors in the United States would say their graduate students from the Mainland were terrific at spouting back at them facts and so on, but not very good at coming up with original ideas. I don't think that's so true today. I'm not an expert in Chinese education, but my sense is that there is much more there, as you are suggesting. The implications for Taiwan, though, first of all, of Xi's consolidation of power, it depends what he wants to do. It depends how he views Taiwan. If I'm right, that he feels that he can afford to be somewhat more patient and try to handle the Taiwan issue very much in a non-confrontational way. I don't see how confrontation over Taiwan, either toward Taiwan or toward the United States or Japan or anybody else, is in the mainland's interest. I really don't see that. And as I said, I do not see any leader in Taiwan elected who is going to promote Taiwan independence in a proactive, if I can use that terrible word, way. So I don't think that the challenge is likely to come from that. The challenge the PRC sees, as I understand it, is that over time you may get what some have called a peaceful separation and not peaceful unification. And so there will be no declaration. Maybe this cultural independence will play a role in it. Maybe Other things, other factors will play a role, but that they're worried that it is going to be very hard, in fact, to get people in Taiwan to identify with their Chinese-ness, or specifically enough to get over to the political realm. I mean, there is strong support in Taiwan for being part of the Chinese nation. 70–80% of people say we're part of the Chinese nation. Zhonghua means it. But they do not say we're part of China. And so it's how to make, I think the challenge for Beijing is in many respects how to translate the former into at least acceptance of some form of the latter. And I think they're worried about that. They're worried about young people in particular, who are perfectly willing to take largesse from the mainland in terms of financial support, educational support, whatever, but not identify politically with the mainland or support in any way a movement toward unification. I don't know what the implication for 10 years from now would be if they don't use this time. And 10 years may be a little short. I mean, you know, the normal sort of thinking is that, well, the goal now is more or less to achieve unification by 2049, the anniversary of the founding, 100th anniversary of the founding of the PRC. She didn't say that, by the way, in terms of what I mentioned at the outset. People's expectations is they thought he might have done that. He might have set a target. He didn't do that. He did, as he has before, not new, tied unification to rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. But he did not take that extra, rather critical step of setting a deadline. So we'll have to see. And as I said, there are political developments within Taiwan could also pull back somewhat from the insistence on not using the mantra. You know, I have to say, under Maing Zhou, people in Taiwan, although it changed for particular reasons, I think, were perfectly content. They weren't happy, overjoyed at living under the 92 consensus, but it was there. It didn't bother their lives particularly. So we could return to something that has elements of that in it, and put this relationship in certain ways back on track. I'm not answering your question directly because I don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's a way of answering it.
Thanks, Alan. Alan mentioned the young people in Taiwan, and to carry that into the room, it would be nice to get a question from somebody under 60 years of age.
Mr. Romberg, my name is Stuart McGurk. I'm at the Center for East Asian Studies, and I'm a foreign area officer in the Army.
Going out where?
I said hopefully growing up to be the next ambassador.
That's a high ambition, sir.
You got to shoot for the stars.
The road to perdition.
My question had to do with democratic resilience and the U.S. policy towards Taiwan, and if we had the right balance. From a security perspective, we see foreign military sales and training and cooperation with Taiwan, but on sort of the softer side of things, are we doing enough or the right kinds of activities to ensure that those security elements in a very kind of operational perspective are tied to securing resilience in Taiwan's democracy, which I think is under threat by things that are cheap for the PRC, like talk and their ability to control or influence a narrative.
Can you expand on that last point a little bit, what you mean?
So the influence that the PRC wields in their ability to control the narrative when it comes to Taiwan, and the control of that narrative on Taiwan's democracy, democratic discourse, faith in institutions, similar things that the United States is struggling or is kind of viewing now, that we see, you know, foreign powers or other actors are able to influence our political discourse at a relatively low cost.
Let me try a shot at that. I'm not sure I totally
I'm sorry, it wasn't a very clear question.
Stuart, do you mean when you say the narrative, controlling the narrative, do you mean controlling the international narrative, and then that is the constraint on Taiwan as a result of that, or are you talking about inside of Taiwan itself?
Inside of Taiwan and Cross-Strait. But I think it also expands beyond the strait, but primarily directly to Taiwan.
Yeah. I guess my impression of democracy in Taiwan and democratic institutions, if you set aside some of the peculiar characteristics of the legislative yuan, debate on occasion, throwing inkwells and things like that, is pretty strong. I don't know that, except for perhaps a minority of activists, people go out and think actively about institutional relationships and so on, but I think they take very seriously their ability to determine policies of their own government and their own society. And so whether we're, first of all, are we responsible for doing that? I think Taiwan is principally responsible for doing that. But I do think we have all sorts of programs, both governmental and non-governmental, that work with Taiwan democracy institutions, witness number one. And I think that I'm not afraid of that as a weakness. Carl's follow-up question, I do think that the PRC has an ability to affect the debate or the perceptions of what is, what's the word, permissible within Taiwan because of the importance of the PRC relationship with all of these countries, including the United States. And as I said in my remarks, we made a decision a long time ago that we weren't going to, the decision was not to give up on Taiwan, although frankly, if you read some of the comments of Kissinger and Nixon at the time, I think there were some assumptions about how that was going to go. That may not be what the ones we have today. But eventually, even Kissinger said there was no way we were going to be able to. But today, that's not the assumption. And so, I'd be interested in your views, Larry, but I don't, and Carl, now you're at the head of the table on this. I don't really have a deep concern about the commitment of people in Taiwan to their democratic way of life. One thing I would say, which probably is quite controversial, is that I mentioned this in my remarks. There are some people today here in this country who believe that essentially we should go back on the deal. And the deal is that it's up to the people on the two sides of the strait to determine their future. I don't agree with that position. We've never had it, we don't have it, and in my view we shouldn't have it. That is not our business. What we should be doing is protecting an environment in which that truly can take place by the people who are concerned in a voluntary, non-coercive environment and so on. But I don't think it's up to us to say, well, that would really be against American interests if you did thus and so. I have a fairly strong bias against that. We haven't been very successful in the world in trying to tell people how to behave, even if it would affect our interests. Even if it would affect our interests, we need to figure out how it would affect our interests and how to deal with that. But that's a different question.
Understood. I think while you were talking, I got my question concise. We have the unification scenario. Most dangerous course of action is unification by military means. Most likely course of action through coercive political means. Does the United States have the right policy balance that focuses on the defense of the potential degradation of Taiwan's democracy through political means?
So is that a second question, or is that question 1.5?
My shot.
Got time for a couple more questions?